Welcome to a tutorial on the 8085 microprocessor, and in this video we're going to discuss about the interrupts in an 8085 microprocessor. So basically, well, first of all, we're going to lay stress on the fact that what are interrupts basically. So what are interrupts? Okay, so this is the question that should pop up in your mind beforehand. Okay, so by the book we can define the interrupts as a process of data transfer that allows peripheral devices to interrupt the microprocessor from carrying on with its present operation and attend to the request that the peripheral device sent it, okay, with which it just interrupted it, and microprocessor then it just stops carrying on with its present operation and attends the request sent by the peripheral device. And now this request might demand immediate attention. So this part is the most important. So generally we can get an idea from this description that during some cases, okay, there are some situations occurring in the devices concerned that employ microprocessors, where the microprocessor needs to get interrupted, or rather needs to stop carrying on with its present operation and will attend to some sort of emergency situation. So this is what actually matters here. If there's an emergency, the microprocessor will just stop carrying on with its present operation and will attend to this emergency situation, okay, and leave everything else in the waiting list. So in order to the question now that could possibly arise is that why are such situations occurring, or rather why do we need them basically? Alright, we know that it's gonna attend an emergency situation, but why do we need such a process? Okay, let me give you an example. So imagine that you were reading a book. Okay, so imagine you were basically reading a book. Okay, it's your favorite book that you're reading, and suddenly there's a gust of wind from your window that was previously open. So your window was open and there is a gust of wind coming in that breaks your vase. So hearing that sound, you suddenly realize that there's a storm coming in. So what do? You just stop reading your book, okay, and mark the page up to which you've just read, and then you just get up and rush towards the window and then close the window, okay, so as to prevent the storm from breaking any more of your household items. Okay, so if there's a storm coming in, you'd always rush towards closing your window no matter what is happening inside. Okay, even if your phone rings, you would give priority to closing the window first before attending your phone call. Okay, so this is an example of an emergency situation. We can also give another example concerning electronic devices. Let's say you're watching a movie. All right, so you're watching a movie on your laptop. Okay, so you're watching a movie on your laptop, and you forgot to charge your laptop. So it's giving you the request that you need to plug your charger, but you just ignored it. And then what happens after some time, if you're basically watching the movie continuously, so if you're continuously watching, okay, and ignoring the request of plugging the charging port, okay, so then what will happen is that your laptop's display suddenly shuts down. Oh my god, what's happened now? So your display suddenly shut down. Now this is basically a very down-to-earth example of what a microprocessor system basically does. You see, there was a microprocessor. I mean, inside your laptop there is a microprocessor, you know that. So this microprocessor, apart from playing your movie, so playing the movie was its I'm going to write that down over here. So playing the movie was its present operation. So this was its present operation, which it has been assigned, and it was performing that. But at the same time, Okay, it was also monitoring the battery voltage level. So it was, well, monitoring the battery voltage level. So monitoring voltage level, okay, voltage on battery. Alright, and now immediately when the level dropped below a certain threshold, okay, that was, well, required to keep the display on, okay, at that moment, sensing this kind of situation, the microprocessor was basically interrupted by the hardware inside your laptop. Okay, so whenever the voltage level or the battery voltage drops, so monitoring a drop, okay, so if your battery voltage basically drop, then your microprocessor is basically interrupted. Okay, so this is the interrupt that comes in. That's a drop in the voltage level, and at that time what it does, it just, well, shuts your display down in order to prevent your battery, I mean laptop battery, from getting damaged, or maybe some kind of other functional problems from arising. Okay, the microprocessor needs to shut down your display. And then, well, you realize that, well, this is kind of an inconvenience, so you just go and then plug your charger port. Okay, so you can basically get an idea from these examples that whenever there is an emergency situation arising in, let's say, in a program, okay, which you have just written, okay, for controlling some device or something, then always you need to provide an interrupt, or rather the interrupt facility in the 8085 basically helps to save, or basically do the needful whatever needs to be done to handle such emergency situations that might arise. Okay, so now the question is, how does a microprocessor like 8085 basically get interrupted? Well, you see, on any kind of microprocessor, not only the 8085, it's the interrupt facility is present in almost all types of processors. Okay, talking about the 8085, basically it has got some pins. Okay, so it has interrupt pins. So these pins are basically used in order to interrupt the 8085. So it's got interrupt pins. Okay, and well, these pins are basically, I'm just giving you the names of each of the pins. So one of them is trap, and then next comes RST 7.5, and then you got, well, RST 6.5, and thereby going on this way you get RST 5.5, and, well, finally you have another pin over here which is known as INTR. Okay, so all these are basically interrupt pins. Okay, so they're basically input pins. The interrupt pins are basically they're input pins. Okay, so whenever there is a voltage level, okay, a required voltage level on each of the pins, basically triggers an interrupt request. It just triggers an interrupt request, okay, in the microprocessor. And whenever the 8085 basically receives an interrupt request, then immediately the instruction, I mean the program that it was basically executing, it just stops executing the program till that point and loads that address in the program counter register. Let's say the 8085 was executing a program, and it was and that program was at the I mean the last instruction of the program that it just executed was present in the location, let's say 2025H. Okay, so the program counter register, being a 16-bit register, basically was storing this particular memory location when the last instruction of the program, the 8085, was executing previously, I mean prior to receiving the interrupt request. So that particular memory address was loaded in the program counter register. Now after receiving the interrupt request, then what happens is the program counter register gets cleared. So you can see that there's nothing over here, and this particular address that was 2025H gets loaded onto the stack memory. So the 8085 loads this address, or rather saves this address in the stack memory. Okay, so there you go. And then it just loads the program counter register with some different memory location. I don't know what it could be. Let's just take it as well, XXXXH. Okay, this is some kind of fictitious memory address that I'm just giving an example over here. So it just loads this particular memory address into the program counter register and transfers the program control right over here. Now in this particular memory location, that is XXXXH, okay, so in this particular memory location, maybe there is some kind of a subroutine. Okay, there is a subroutine program, okay, that helps the 8085 to perform those necessary functions that are needed to handle the emergency situation for which it received this interrupt request. Okay, so XXXXH is actually the memory location from where this subroutine program starts. Okay, or there might be some other kind of a function that the 8085 would basically perform under this kind of an interrupt request. So we might have a subroutine program for handling the situation, or it might be something else. That depends upon the designer. Okay, so now that we have an idea of what this interrupt is all about, now let's just take a look at a little bit of, let's just take a description for each of these interrupt pins that we have over here. Okay, so we've just listed the interrupt pins over here for the 8085. Now basically we can divide these entire set of interrupt pins on the 8085 into certain categories. Just don't mind that, it's a slip of tongue. Okay, so what happens is that you can see that we have just listed them in a hierarchical order, okay, with the trap being kept at position 1. So this kind of gives us an idea that the trap, this particular interrupt pin, has the highest priority. Okay, now interrupt pins, they have a priority factor over here that just comes in, because you can have multiple devices sending interrupt requests to multiple interrupt pins at the same time. So it's like your dad and your best friend calling you at the same time. So maybe both of them just call you at the same time. Now you'll have to attend the call of your dad because he's the one who takes care of your pocket money, so you don't just mind disappointing him. Otherwise what the consequences could be. So jokes apart, now the fact is that the trap has the highest priority. Okay, and then comes the priority of the following interrupt pins that are just arranged likewise. So RST 7.5 comes second in priority, and then RST 6.5 third, 5.5 fourth, and finally the least priority that is given to the INTR pin over here. Okay, now this has the least priority. Okay, I'm just gonna write that down over here. Now there's another thing that you need to take care about, that is there are, you can also classify the interrupt pins on the basis of whether they're vectored or non-vectored. Now before going on to the concept of vectoring, let me just tell you that whenever I just mentioned a little while ago that whenever the 8085 would just encounter an interrupt request, okay, then it might just send the program control to some different memory location. So now the question is, which memory location does the 8085 direct the program control? Now that's exactly what I'm just gonna describe over here. Now the 8085 will provide some pre-designated memory locations for the trap, RST 7.5, 6.5 and 5.5, and those are just in the order as I'm just giving over here. So they are just you can see the order in which the call locations that is given over here. So whenever there is some kind of interrupt request on the trap pin, the 8085 will transfers the program control to this particular memory location, that is 0024. For RST 7.5, it is the memory location 003C. For 6.5, 0034, and for 5.5 it is 002CH correspondingly. And this is why these interrupt pins, that is a trap, RST 7.5, 6.5 and 5.5, are well referred to as the vectored interrupts. So they're all were referred to as vectored interrupts. Okay, that means there is a pre-designated memory call location where the program control would be transferred upon receiving an interrupt request on the following interrupt pins, as I've just listed them down over here. Okay, and the 8085 provides an inbuilt hardware, okay, inside its own chip structure that will transfers them to these memory call locations. But what about INTR? Well, this is not the case with INTR. You need to design an external hardware circuitry. So you need to design an external hardware circuitry in order to transfer the program control to the required call location upon receiving an interrupt request on the INTR pin. So you just need to configure an external hardware to enable program control transfer. Okay, so program control transfer. Okay, so that's the unfortunate part about the INTR pin over here. So what happens is that due to this particular reason, the INTR pin is basically regarded as a non-vectored interrupt. So this is just regarded as a non-vectored interrupt. Okay, now there's one more thing I'd like to add over here, the concept of maskability. Okay, so what do I mean by the term maskability? Well, see, masking something means, well, hiding it, right? Now whenever there is an interrupt request on the trap pin, okay, you cannot hide, or rather the 8085 just cannot ignore it under any circumstance. So it is non-maskable, meaning it cannot be ignored. So this is non-maskable. Okay, that's the trap pin. But on the other hand, the interrupt lines, that is RST 7.5, 6.5 and 5.5, and even the INTR are all maskable interrupt lines. Okay, meaning you can write some sort of software code and well, if you want to, you can basically ignore them, right? The situation over here is more similar to a condition where consider a situation that you're on a vacation and you don't want anybody from calling you up and disturbing you. So if somebody calls you up and disturbs you, well, you might feel interrupted. So that's kind of disturbance. So what you do is that you just switch your phone off. So right now you have just basically ignored every interrupt request coming from anyone else. Okay, so you've just ignored everyone that is trying to call you. So similar is the situation over here. So if you want to, you can basically ignore the interrupt request on these pins that are basically maskable. Okay, now the question is, now how do we do that? Well, we have two instructions. That is, one is known as EI, meaning enable interrupt. Okay, so this instruction is basically used to basically enable the 8085 to accept any interrupt request. So we need a logic 1 on this particular line, which is basically an input line. Okay, and on the other hand, we have another, or rather, this is basically, well, not an input line. Sorry, I just made a mistake. Don't mind that. Well, this is basically an instruction to actually enable the 8085 to actually get or receive interrupt requests. Okay, and there's another instruction known as DI, meaning disable interrupt, just the opposite of what I just said. Okay, so this just does the needful to disable the 8085's ability to accept any interrupt requests. So by executing this particular command, okay, or just including it in your program, you can just keep or rather you mask the RST 7.5, 6.5, 5.5 and even INTR interrupt requests. Okay, alright, so that was quite a lot. And finally, this is the pin diagram of the 8085, which just shows us the entire group of interrupt pins, starting from that of pin 6 through to pin 10. Okay, and well, each of these interrupt pins, which are of course input lines, they require a logic 1 voltage level to be to actually receive some kind of interrupt request. So they are just enabled or excited with a logic 1 voltage level. Okay, so you can just call them active high. So all of them are basically active high. So that said, we just wind up our discussion in this particular tutorial, and we're going to see you in the forthcoming tutorial. So till then, just stay tuned and keep watching.